Guilty! 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 34 times guilty. That is what the Manhattan courtroom, including Trump, heard last week regarding the 34 counts of falsifying business records to cover hush money payments to silence Stormy Daniels and protect Trump's image for the 2016 election. So, is Trump gonna be shipped off to Alcatraz? Let's break it down. I'm just going to state the obvious by saying that sentences are correlated to the crime at hand. So in Trump's case, all of his convictions are regarding falsifying business records. The prosecution was able to prove through the trial that after Michael Cohen paid Stormy Daniels $130,000 as hush money to silence her story of a brief affair with the former president, Trump repaid Michael Cohen and lied about the reason for repayment 34 times. Sort of. There were 34 documented cases of the money being used to advance his campaign without disclosure to the public. And each of these felonies carries with it the possibility of a sentence of 4 years per guilty conviction. If you want me to do the math, I will. That's, carry this. So that's 128 years. But that's only on paper. That's not happening. In situations like this where it's roughly the same crime over and over and over and over and over and over, but there aren't new motives or new victims or new facts and circumstances, each conviction sort of collapses in on itself in the eyes of the legal system. And so maybe the net possible aggregate value of these claims is more like 8 to 10 years in prison total. At least on paper. When evaluating sentencing options for felons, New York State judges consider a wide variety of factors to ensure that the sentence is fair and just and serves the interests of justice. Here are the key factors that they typically consider. First of all, the nature and circumstances of the crime. Judges evaluate the specifics of the offense, including its severity, whether it involved violence, the use of a weapon, and the impact on victims. Next, they look at criminal history. The defendant's prior criminal record plays a significant role. As you might imagine, repeat offenders may receive harsher sentences compared to first-time offenders. Next, we look at mitigating and aggravating factors. Mitigating factors might include things like the defendant's background or mental health issues, lack of prior criminal history, remorse, cooperation with law enforcement, and any circumstances that may have led to the crime. Of course, aggravating factors are the opposite. These include the brutality of the crime, premeditation, targeting of vulnerable victims like children or the elderly. Is that a crack at Joe Biden? No. And any other prior convictions for similar offenses. You also have victim impact statements. Judges consider statements from victims or their families about how the crime has affected their lives. Then you also have a thing called a pre-sentence investigation report, or PSI report. This report is prepared by a probation officer and includes detailed information about the defendant's background, family, education, employment, substance abuse history, and other relevant personal details. Normally, a PSI is written after the probation officer has had a series of interviews with the defendant, but Trump is not going to be sitting for any interviews with his probation officer. Can you imagine being Trump's probation officer? That's so weird. Anything that the probation officer needs to know about Trump, he will already know because Trump is a public figure. You can look it up on YouTube. There's no shot that he ever participates in a PSI interview. And that's pretty weird because the system is the same for everyone until it's not. And then of course, judges can look at plea agreements. If there's a plea bargain, the terms of the agreement will influence sentencing. Judges often adhere to the terms agreed upon by the prosecution and defense unless there are compelling reasons not to. But as you know, there was no plea in this case. Next, we have sentencing guidelines and statutory requirements. Judges must follow New York State's sentencing guidelines, which outline the minimum and maximum penalties for various offenses. Certain crimes have mandatory minimum sentences. As I said earlier, it's a 4-year max per conviction for this crime. These 34 crimes, but there is no minimum. There's nothing that says, oh, you have to spend 1 night in jail for each one. There's no minimum on this trial. Defendant's personal circumstances. Judges can consider the defendant's age, health, family responsibilities, employment status, and potential for rehabilitation. Then there's public safety and deterrence. Judges consider the need to protect the community and the potential deterrent effect of the sentence on both this defendant, but also on others who might commit similar crimes. Then we have recommendations from counsel. Sentencing recommendations from both the prosecution and defense attorneys can be considered. And honestly, the recommendations from the prosecutor carry a lot of weight, as long as they're reasonable. If they're not reasonable, the judge just ignore them. Next, we have community impact. The broader impact of the crime on the community may also be taken into account, particularly in cases involving significant public harm. By weighing all of these factors, judges aim to impose sentences that balance punishment, deterrence, rehabilitation, and the protection of society. Those are the goals. But what I want to do today is let's look at the top 3 factors that could help Trump get a light sentence, and then also the top 3 factors that could hurt him, that could cause him to wind up in the slammer. In favor of a lighter sentence, I got number 3 as recommendations from counsel. The prosecution is unlikely to be unsavvy enough to allow Trump more space to play the martyr role than he's already taken. I think the prosecutors will not ask for him to be jailed. That will go a long way with the judge, because it usually does. At number 2, the factor that I think helps Trump get a lighter sentence is his lack of criminal history. This one is on a razor-thin margin, however, since Trump currently has more than 50 other crimes pending against him as either charges or indictments. But a charge is just a charge, and maybe he doesn't get convicted on any of those. I don't know. So for now, this factor is still in his favor. And when you combine that with Trump's age, Trump is I think 190,000 years old. No, that could be Biden. That's not right. Trump is 77 years old. He's gone a long time without being busted for criming. The number 1 factor in Trump's favor for a light sentence is the category of the victim impact statements. And to fully analyze this, we need to go back in time to 2016, because the underlying crime that the prosecutor said that Trump was furthering was a campaign finance violation. And of course, the reason we have disclosure rules around campaign finance is so that the public can know where political money came from and what it got spent on. Trump won the 2016 election, perhaps partly because of his sneaky and illegal management of the Stormy Daniels story. And then in 2020, we had a new election. And at that point, the entire public knew all about the Stormy Daniels affair, the hush money, and the cover-up, and Michael Cohen had already been to jail over this mess. All the story was very fully ventilated in the media. I mean, to exhaustion. And yet, Trump still got more than 70 million votes in that 2020 election. In fact, up until that point, he received more votes than any other candidate for president in U.S. history. Except, of course, for the fact that same day, a guy named Joe Biden got even more votes. But it was by a pretty thin margin. But the point remains, if we all knew about the campaign finance expenditure in 2020 and all the dirty laundry was on display, and Trump still got over 70 million people to vote for him, then it's hard to say with a straight face that there are victims who were greatly affected by the crime back in 2016. Because it seems like, honestly, no one really cared. That doesn't make it non-criminal, but it does lessen the need for him to have to go to jail to make society whole. But let's look at the other side of the equation. What sort of factors would make the judge chant, "Lock him up, lock him up"? Wow. That clip did not age well for Mr. Trump, did it? At number 3, let's start with deterrence for other potential criminals. Look, we have these public integrity laws for a reason, and we want businessmen and businesswomen to follow the law. We have to send a message when they don't. And if the sentence is too lenient, it will send a message to other rich and powerful people that we actually have a 2-tiered system of justice in this country, and then they can just kind of sort of do whatever they want. And the judge is not going to want to send that message. Not at all. Number 2, Trump's likelihood of being rehabilitated. If the judge determines that a wake-up call will be effective for Trump, that if he has the rule of law applied to him, he will respect it more, then this could hurt Trump and could cause him to end up with a longer sentence, enough so that the judge could think, he's getting the message and that he has to live under the laws. But the number 1 thing that will hurt Trump on July 11th, when he has his sentencing hearing, and the judge's ruling either that day or shortly thereafter, is definitely going to be Trump's utter and complete lack of remorse. It's actually been crazy. He's attacked the judge, the prosecutor, the witnesses, the process, the courtroom, everything. He's been the opposite of a model criminal defendant. I mean, he seems like he would want to do these same crimes again, or maybe that he's currently trying to do stuff like that and worse. Judges work inside the legal system for a defendant to maintain that the entire system is corrupt, or that the judge is corrupt, when it is the defendant, the one who has been charged with and then convicted of corruption. That's going to be hard for the judge to take. I can see this judge saying that he has been patient and long-suffering, and he certainly has, but now that the jury has spoken, it is time to drop the hammer, aka to treat Trump just like anyone else who's been convicted of almost 36 felonies. And he doesn't seem to give a all in all, it's Trump's attacks on the system, in my view, is the one thing that stands to hurt him the most when it comes time for sentencing. Now that we have this conviction times 34, Trump can no longer vote in this or any other election. Not for himself, and not even for his buddy Joe Biden. But maybe he could post a poll on Truth Social and get a lot of votes there. But let's take a stab at the million-dollar question. Can Donald Trump still be president? And an even harder question, should he be? Whether he should or shouldn't be is a political question. It's not a legal one, and I encourage everyone to vote or not vote for whomever they think will be the best leader. But from the legal perspective of whether he can be president, he sure can. He will be on every state ballot, and the only vote that he is sure to not get is his own. A 34 times convicted felon might not get confirmed to a cabinet seat by the U.S. Senate, but the reality is that U.S. voters might very well give Trump a redemption tour later this year. Although Trump said it would be a revenge tour. But in any case, he promises to make America like super great again. What are your thoughts on having a felon be the 47th president of the United States? And how do you feel about this all guilty verdict? Please drop your pro se opinion down below in the comments and let me know what you think. Trump's sentencing is currently scheduled for July 11th. It'll be here before you know it. And that is when we expect to find out what the judge's decision is. So set your alarm clocks, put it on your calendar, and hit the subscribe button. Because as soon as we have a sentence, you already know that America's attorney's gonna break it down for you. I'll see you then. Guilty, guilty. Did I say penalties? But I want to see you. I messed it up.